that. Also, too, we're on your local SuperTalk Mississippi radio station. And don't forget to watch us if you would like on your computer, your mobile device. Just head on over to SuperTalk TV. Now, our next guest had no idea that they were going to come together on two national days to bring us good information. It is National Poultry Day and it's National Backyard Day. And we've got Dr. Jessica Wells as well as Jonathan Moon from Poultry Science there at Mississippi State University to talk about backyard chickens. Welcome, y'all.
Hi.
Hey, how are we doing today?
You're doing well. I had no idea. Rhino just informed me. He said, yeah, you got these two guests on to talk about the increase in interest in people having chickens in their backyard for eggs and for other reasons on National Poultry Day. You guys may have known it's that. And National Backyard Day. And I thought, well, look at there. I had no idea, but they go perfectly together. Okay, I don't know who wants to take this one first, either Dr. Wells or you, Jonathan, but why do you think there has been such a spark in the rise of interest in having backyard chickens, not just since the egg prices have soared in the last couple of months, but particularly, I would say, since COVID? It seems like it's the new trend to have your own chickens. Have y'all seen that as well?
Yeah, honestly, there's been backyard production all around, and a lot of people don't recognize that it's there. But I would agree that we've seen a rise since COVID. I think a lot of that's probably just due to people wanting to kind of get back to the roots of agriculture, test the waters, and see if they're capable of it. And poultry is a perfect opportunity to do so. You know, it's a livestock that's small. It doesn't take a whole lot of space. And it's kind of an easy thing to jump into when you don't have any background in agriculture or raising livestock. So I think egg prices and your prices that we're seeing probably do escalate it a little bit. But honestly, I think it's just everyone kind of wanting to get back to those roots and try their hand in homegrown food.
Which definitely has its place, but also I have to admit it seems a little terrifying. And I feel like for some people to keep something alive, right? Like there's all of us who plant our gardens in March or April, and just knowing that the tomato plant's probably not going to make it. So you need to have a little bit more thought process into it before you bring something you have to feed sort of home through it. And that's what I hope we do here today. Can anyone have backyard chickens, or are there regulations on where you live on whether you can or can't do that people should know?
So believe it or not, there's quite a few regulations out there. Usually city ordinances are in place. A lot of those don't necessarily say that you can't have chickens, but they might have stipulations in no roosters or the amount of chickens that you have. Some HOAs might have rules and regulations in place in your specific neighborhoods. Obviously, if you're in a rural area, you're not going to face ordinances like you would in the city limits. But for the most part, they are kind of a livestock that you can find even in city limits, neighborhoods. It's just kind of one of those things that you kind of need to check in with your local city operations and whatnot just to see.
Is the rooster, no rooster thing just for a nuisance? Like, is it just because they make more noise?
Yes, it's more of that noise complaint. And in all reality, if you're jumping into getting into chickens and you don't know a whole lot about them, roosters really are just somewhat of a nuisance. I hate to say that, but they're not needed. If you're just getting chickens to where you want to supply your family household with eggs, you don't need a rooster. All he's going to do is create issues for you in all reality. The only time you would need that rooster is if you plan to hatch chicks, and most people really don't care to have hens laying eggs and hatching their own chicks. So for the most part, roosters can be pretty, but that's pretty much the only purpose they serve for you.
So how much space, Dr. Wells or Jonathan, should you think about having before you go out and just, start buying chickens? Is there I know there's a recommendation with, other livestock, like an acre to, so many cows or whatever it may be. Is there sort of that mindset with chickens?
Yeah, there is kind of a general understanding as far as space. We allot certain floor space in the commercial side of the industry, which Jonathan could tell you a lot more about that. But in a backyard setting, an average of 4 to 5 square feet per bird is usually pretty applicable. And I say that loosely just from the standpoint that, believe it or not, all chickens and different breeds of chickens can have different personalities. So you have some breeds that may be a little more aggressive, maybe they're a little more flighty, and they would need more space. You have some breeds that are a lot larger than others, so obviously more space would be needed for them. And then some breeds, if they're super docile breeds, maybe you don't need a full 4 square feet. You could get away with a little bit less. So it's kind of one of those that if you're not familiar with chickens, add a lot more just to be safe. But it's kind of one of those where you might have to play around with it a little bit and figure out what works for you and your area best.
Man, I'm more overwhelmed than when we started, Dr. Wells. So is there a actual breed that's maybe best for a beginner? Now I feel like I would walk in and it would be like at a plant shop and you start reading the little thing on how much sunlight and space apart they need, and you're like, I don't know if I've got all of that. so
Right.
I'm just going to stick to ferns. And so is there like a breed of chicken that you should just stick to if you're kind of a beginner, if you want, just some eggs in your backyard?
So main thing to consider when you get started is, do you plan to have eggs out of the backyard that you're just supplying yourself and your family with? Maybe you share with a neighbor. Do you want meat? What purpose are they going to serve? Generally, if you're wanting just eggs in your backyard, your Leghorn breeds are really good at laying eggs. They're going to give you the most eggs of any of the breeds. However, they are a little more of a flighty bird. It's not one that you can really tame up very well. So if you're wanting more of a chicken that you can go out and pet and, interact with a little more, you may want to go with more of a dual-purpose breed, which your American birds, most people are familiar with those. They're like your Rhode Island Reds, your Barred Plymouth Rocks, your White Plymouth Rocks, New Hampshires. Those are those American breeds. They're a larger body style, and a lot of people like them because they lay a brown egg, and a lot of people like a brown egg in backyard settings. Honestly, there's probably no set magic breed for somebody. There's a lot that comes into play with what you want to choose. There's a lot of fancy breeds out there that are really pretty. But like anything else, usually when you purchase those ones that are really pretty, they're not really good at the production realm of giving you eggs or producing enough meat for you to consume. So you have to kind of weigh out your options of what do you want? Do you want a chicken that's super docile that my kids can hold and play with? Do I want something that looks pretty? Do I want something that gives me eggs? And generally, in all reality, when somebody gets started with this and they start to hit those walls of not knowing, that's what me and Mr. Moon are here for. We'll take those calls in and try to guide people as best we can on what's going to work better for them.
I've also heard, Dr. Wells, you shouldn't have a chicken. You need a few chickens for them to do well. What's the minimum number that you should at least have for the chickens to have, I guess, friends and do their best?
So, in all reality, I guess you could have one chicken. It may just be that they are a social animal, and, the preference would be to have more than one just because it gives them a companion, a little bit of company there. Maybe they're not as needy. They're not wanting you as much if they have another chicken there. But in all reality, when you think about it, a chicken can lay an egg just about every 25 hours. So that's almost an egg a day. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to get some chickens from my backyard. I'll get 10. But you're then thinking 10 eggs a day. And that's a lot of eggs to eat. So generally, if I have somebody call me that says I want to get some yard birds that I plan to eat eggs off of, just for my family of 4 or family of 6, 2 or 3 chickens, honestly, 3 chickens is probably going to give you more than enough eggs for just yourself. You start to get into 20, 30 chickens and you have eggs coming out of everywhere that you're having to figure out what what to do with. So, I mean, rule of thumb, I probably would not start with more than 3 to 5 chickens in my backyard if I just wanted something to test run, and that's going to supply you with plenty of eggs for yourself.
Such good information, Dr. Wells. You guys hang with us. We've got more with Jonathan Moon and Dr. Wells from Mississippi State's Poultry Science coming up next. Mississippi app and your local SuperTalk Mississippi radio station. And you can watch us too if you would like. We are on your computer, your mobile device. Just head on over to SuperTalk TV. Do you have backyard chickens? It's a growing trend, and it can be definitely a good thing. And Dr. Jessica Wells, as well as Jonathan Moon, both instructors of poultry science at Mississippi State, are joining us today to kind of walk through the needs or what to know. Now, Jonathan, and from the commercial standpoint, if someone's listening and maybe they're just rushing out to get, them some backyard chickens, not for just the fun of it or the hobby, but more because they're worried about commercial eggs. What do you say to that? What would you like folks to know, or at least have a little bit more education before making that decision?
When you say worried about the commercial eggs, what do you mean there?
Well, I would say many people would express concerns in either safety would be the first ones, particularly with some of the things going on with birds, bird flu, and sort of the other things. And the other would be just nutritionally speaking, the comparison between a backyard egg versus a commercial egg. Is there much difference there? I think that would be the two things that I've heard, at least as a dietitian, that people are concerned with when it comes to making that distinctive choice in purchase.
Right. So, yeah, that's a really good question. As far as the nutritional aspect of it, no, there's no difference. As far as the safety of the product, I know with the avian influenza going around, that's probably a hot topic, and maybe some people are a little concerned about that, but there's no risk with the eggs or the meat in the food chain. There's real strict policies in place, with the broilers and the meat chickens. Everything is AI tested before it goes to the processing plant. The flocks are AI tested. The layers are. If there is an outbreak, everything is disposed of, so none of that goes into the food chain. And one of the biggest things to remember is, there's been no cases of avian influenza getting into humans by way of the food chain. And at the same time, as an added safeguard, if you're properly handling your poultry products, your chicken, your eggs, and cooking them to that internal temperature of 165 degrees, that takes care of a lot of viruses and bacteria that may be present. So, there's no real risk there.
Yeah, that's what that's what I try to encourage folks to. And I know still, like Dr. Wells, there are folks who just really enjoy having their backyard birds or just look at it as a new hobby for their family. And like you mentioned, kind of get back to that homesteading roots. And there's definitely a place for that. But I get tickled when people say, because the chicken price or the egg prices are rising, I'm going to, get chickens to offset that cost. It's almost like I chuckle when I hear people say, I'm going to go hunt and harvest deer so I don't have to pay so much for meat. And I'm like, maybe not per pound, and which, look, we love, I think both are wonderful, but there's a lot that goes into keeping healthy backyard birds that people may not think about that, ultimately pays to the price of what the product that you're getting. So what are some of those like baseline things that people need to think about in terms of cost to keeping backyard birds healthy?
Yeah, so in all reality, honestly, we see a rise in prices for eggs, but you're seeing a rise in prices for just about everything right now. We're in a area of inflation, and that's definitely something to consider when you're starting that backyard flock. And I don't ever want to try and talk someone out of backyard chickens. I just want them to be aware of what they're getting into. It is a living animal, so it requires 7 days worth of care. You can't take a day off. They still have to eat. They have to have maintenance, proper care. So you've got your coop cost, your feed cost. That egg in the grocery store may cost a good bit, but really when you divide it out, our eggs are extremely cheap. It's one of the cheapest protein sources that you can get your hands on. So people don't recognize that, simple bagged feed, once you're feeding those chickens, that has an impact on their production. So if I don't feed them correctly, I'm not going to get as many eggs off of them. What they eat can also dictate how those eggs taste. So, you hear a lot of people say, well, the nutrition in a backyard egg is a lot better than it is in the industry because my eggs are richer colored and they taste different. And that is somewhat true from a standpoint of the color can vary, the flavor can vary based on what those birds consume, because that nutrition that they consume goes back into that egg. However, it doesn't impact the nutritional value of the egg, but it will impact flavor. So when you look at people that say, well, I'm just going to feed my chickens some scraps, that's not going to cost me extra, I'll let them free range. That doesn't cost me anything because I don't have a coop. The problem is you've now got birds that aren't on a nutritional, healthy diet, and they're not going to thrive. You're going to impact the way those eggs are taste. You're also going to run into disease problems because chickens, believe it or not, are pretty susceptible to things, and they're pretty much a walking target. I mean, just about anything eats a chicken, not just us. Birds of prey, snakes, dogs, cats, raccoons, you name it, they pretty much will come after a chicken. So, free ranging sounds nice, but in all reality, they're just pretty susceptible to just about anything out there.
I didn't know cats would kill chickens, Dr. Wells.
Yeah.
I'm sad about that. I don't know why. I guess it's a big bird. Yeah, it's a big bird, so I could see that. We had a listener text in, Dr. Wells, and ask Bobby and Hazelhurst, how long can you keep eggs, and do they need to be refrigerated? And I'm guessing he's talking about, or I'm going to insert the backyard egg, because I know that's another thing, that people find helpful or beneficial is that you can keep them a little bit longer, or maybe before you refrigerate them. What's the safety protocol around that?
So, believe it or not, we're kind of one of the only countries that refrigerate our eggs. If you go anywhere else overseas and go look in their grocery stores and their markets, eggs are usually just sitting on shelves. They're not refrigerated. That's something that's done here. It is safe to not refrigerate your eggs. However, when you don't refrigerate them, they aren't going to last as long. They will downgrade a little bit quicker. So depending on how quickly you eat your eggs, that's something to think about. At my house, I have a lot of kids in my household. I have 4 kids, and we don't refrigerate our eggs because I need refrigerator space for everything else. But we also eat them really quickly. So in backyard settings, you hear a lot of people that will contemplate whether you need to wash eggs or not wash eggs, if they can be stored on the countertop or not. The main thing is if you're area that you've got eggs laid in, if you're keeping really good biosecurity measures and cleanliness in place, they should not come in contact with a lot of the things that can make them unsafe. And in all reality, you can keep eggs a pretty fair amount, especially when you look at them compared to other food items that we keep. A couple weeks on the countertop, and they should still be good to eat. Usually when you see them downgrade, it's that the inside of the egg, that albumin and the yolk will start to break down, and they don't have that firm appearance. So a lot of times they're not as good at baking your cakes and making them as fluffy, but they're still safe to eat. But refrigeration is also something that, it's not going to hurt anything if you refrigerate eggs. It's just kind of what protocol you have in place and what's best practice for you.
So much good information from both of you. We've got more texts coming in that we can get to. If people have questions about backyard chickens or starting those, or maybe even just want to pick, Jonathan's brain about more about commercial, if they've got concerns, how do they get in touch with you guys or what you guys are doing there at Mississippi State?
For sure. So generally backyard startup, I answer a lot of those questions. However, I do teach multiple classes on campus, and I have a heavy load of other appointments. So Jonathan Moon will also funnel those questions. But commercial, I hand those all over to him. So if they need information on poultry production, the easiest method is to email us, and you can find our email information on our Poultry Science website at Mississippi State University. They can also call the front office, but those calls are usually funneled to answering machine services, and we generally will ask them to email just so that we have a record of what's being asked, and that way we can answer those questions a little more promptly. But all of that information in order to contact us is located on the Mississippi State Poultry Extension page or Poultry Science departmental page. You can find all of our extension personnel listed and contact information.
Well, I appreciate you both. So much good information today. I am sad about cats and chickens, but here we go. It's the real world. But thank you for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. All right, you guys stick with us. We got more for you coming up.